The heat is on former FBI Director James Comey. He's currently under scrutiny by a Senate committee, as well as the Inspector General of the Justice Department over how he handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Comes as the White House is suggesting the Justice Department should look into potentially prosecuting Comey.
I think if there's ever a moment where we feel someone's broken the law, particularly if they're the head of the FBI, I think that's something that certainly should be looked at.
Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush, and Richard Fowler is a radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Welcome to you both.
Morning.
Good to be here, Shannon.
Okay, so Richard, do you think there are some valid questions here? We know that Senator Lindsey Graham is among those saying, listen, we've learned a lot since James Comey was fired. Some of this doesn't add up. His words, I smell a rat. I want him to come back and answer more questions. Do you think that's a valid request?
That could be a valid request. I mean, this is a very, very interesting story as it continues to unravel itself. We saw in the 60-minute interview that Steve Bannon gave where he sort of talked about the worst political mistake that Donald Trump ever made was firing Jim Comey, and I tend to agree with Steve Bannon on that particular point because I think that's how we got to this Mueller investigation to begin with. But then I think, we could ask questions about whether or not his leaking was problematic. Was his leaking criminal? I think there's those investigations to be had. And I think beyond that, you have this looming Mueller investigation that Trump has to deal with. Is there impropriety? Did Don Trump Jr. engage in some sort of Russian conspiracy? So there's a lot of looming investigations on top of investigations on top of investigations here. So we'll have to see what happens. But I think what the Trump administration is trying to do here on defense is sort of push the needle on Comey and sort of get it away from them. And for once, this is a smart move by the Trump administration to get to turn the heat down a little bit.
Brad,
and so,
listen to
some
that.
Good politics.
Richard is giving the Trump administration credit. So just so we know what we're talking about, the Office of Special Counsel in the Justice Department, at least we know at one point, had a Hacked Act investigation going with former FBI Director Comey. The Department of Justice Inspector General handling how he handled the HRC email investigation. Did he go outside the chain of command? Now there are these questions about whether he was already drafting something to exonerate her before she'd ever been interviewed, Brad. So by the way, we want to play you what Hillary Clinton thinks about Mr. Comey. Here's what she said.
He was fired for the wrong reason.
But should have been fired?
He should not have been fired for Russia. He should have been disciplined. Whether or not fired, that's not for me to say, but he should have been disciplined for the way that he behaved on the email investigation. And in fact, the Deputy Attorney General, backed by the Attorney General of this administration, laid out in excruciating detail all of the protocols and rules that he broke.
So, Brad, people on both sides of the aisle think he should be in trouble over the way he handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation.
And he's in trouble. They're investigating him, and Lindsey Graham is right. This doesn't pass the smell test. There are a bunch of irregularities with the way, at best, Comey handled himself, if not criminal. The fact that he was even drafting a clearance letter of a target who's herself is mind-boggling. The fact that he gave immunity to key witnesses who destroyed key government evidence, it doesn't pass the smell test. The fact that he released and not released, but leaked information is unconscionable. So Hillary Clinton is right. He should have been fired. And Donald Trump did fire him. And now he has to answer to Congress as to how he bungled the Hillary investigation when it's clear that numerous laws were broken, including the releasing of classified information, which he had on a personal server.
Richard, do you think that she's right? Do you think that Mrs. Clinton is right that he should be in trouble for how he handled the investigation?
Well, I think it's hard to know whether or not he should have been fired for how he handled the investigation. I think there's some murkiness around it, there's no question, but without getting all the details. And I think that's something that we have to sort of sit back and talk about here as Americans and as journalists. We only get bits and pieces of all these investigations, what's leaked out by the press, what we get our hands on.
Or by the FBI director himself.
Or by the FBI director. That's very true. But we only get bits and pieces, and we try to sort of read between the lines and make these connections sort of tied together by duct tape. And we're not on the inside. We don't really know what's happening. And we take that and we take allegations and we turn allegations into truth. And that's not only that's not right, but that sort of makes people believe things that aren't necessarily true. So we've got to be very careful when we say that. Until we get all the facts, until we get all the details, until everything is laid out, we can't make a defined definition about Comey, just like we can't make a defined definition about Donald Trump. We can't say we should impeach him until we get all the information, and we can't say that that James Comey's guilty of a crime until we get all the information. So we've got to be very careful on both of those points.
I think that we would all agree on that investigations have purpose. They are working their way through, and until we get something definitive, and many Democrats on the Russia President Trump allegations say they haven't seen anything concrete yet. So we will wait on both counts.
We've got to wait.
Back, and we'll talk about it some more. Brad and Richard, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Now to overseas, where U.S. and North Korea tensions continue. Kim Jong-un vowing to double down on his country's military strength after a new round of UN sanctions were fired his way. President Trump, meanwhile, firing back, suggesting the sanctions won't make much of a difference.
We think it's just another very small step. Not a big deal. Rex and I were just discussing. Not big, I don't know if it has any impact, but certainly it was nice to get a 15-0 vote. But those sanctions are nothing compared to what ultimately will have to happen.
Let's go to Seoul now. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live in South Korea with more from there. Greg.
Hi, Bill. Yeah, we are getting more reaction from North Korea regarding those recent UN sanctions against the regime. And the words are not pretty. We're hearing from the foreign ministry via the state media there. It is condemning the sanctions, categorically rejecting them, and yes, saying the regime will work at a, quote, faster pace to build up its offensive arsenal. This amid reports that we are seeing from analysts that we have worked with, that we trust, of new activity, vehicles, construction equipment at a site of a recent nuclear test. A possible sign, these analysts say, of future tests. Now, these same folks are saying that the detonation that we saw in the past 10 days, bigger than we thought. The original estimate was about 100 kilotons. Now they're saying it could have been 250 kilotons. That puts it well in the range of a thermonuclear device. Very worrying. Amid more saber rattling coming from South Korea. This time the Air Force, they conducted today the first live-fire test of an advanced air-to-land cruise missile capable of hitting targets in North Korea. This comes just one day after those exercises that we observed involving South Korean and U.S. Marines. According to one American analyst we spoke to here, the Trump administration has got to stop playing catch-up. Take a listen.
Since Donald Trump came into office, Kim Jong-un is really the one who's controlling the tempo. And so that's something that the Trump administration needs to think about. We need to try and shake this up and change the game that we're playing.
Analyst Delury told me that President Trump has got to go back to Plan A, making that offer to speak with Kim Jong-un maybe over that hamburger. There's only one problem with that, Bill. That was several missile launches and a nuclear test ago. Wow. Back to you.
Greg Palcott, thanks. On the ground there in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you.
And as we continue to hear stories coming out of Florida, one nun is helping to clean up debris from Hurricane Irma. Check it out. It's gone viral. Video taken by an off-duty Miami-Dade police officer showing Sister Margaret Ann, habit and all, cutting off branches from a downed tree. You go, girl. The department later posting the video with the caption, Sister Margaret Ann in action. Thank you to all of our neighbors that are working together to get through this. We are hashtag Miami-Dade strong. She's very strong. I love that. Not waiting for any formalities, grabbing the chainsaw, getting out there.
It's like, forget the prayers, give me a chainsaw.
Yeah, getting it done.
We're going to get this right. Meanwhile, President Trump now, Vice President Mike Pence, heading to Florida tomorrow on Thursday, assessing the damage from Irma. Top of the hour, we'll talk to Kellyanne Conway about that and a whole lot more, so don't miss that interview. Plus, there's this today from the Hill.
It seems that this complete government takeover of health care is becoming the litmus test for the liberal left.
That was Republican Senator John Barrasso weighing in on a new bill from Senator Bernie Sanders that calls for a single-payer system. It's getting a lot of support out there, by the way. Senator Barrasso joins us next to talk about that and the GOP's latest efforts to repeal Obamacare. Police are right now evacuating a nursing home in Hollywood, Florida. It's just north of Miami. Officials say at least 5 people have died at that facility since Hurricane Irma hit. We're told there's no power. It is very hot inside there. They're still investigating which of these deaths may have actually been directly connected to the storm. We're told a couple of patients died in transport to the hospital. 120 residents have been evacuated, and that continues. We'll keep you updated.
Senator Graham, Senator Cassidy have a proposal that they're working on. Senator Alexander and Senator Murray are looking at the problem in the Help Committee. And I think the way forward, at least as of today, is not clear, but those discussions are underway, and we'll see where they go.
So where are we now? Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell talking about health care options. Republicans getting ready for another crack at Obamacare. Wyoming Senator John Barrasso is with me now, leading this charge in part. Senator, good morning and welcome back. You're going to take another swing at this, are you?
Well, we're trying to get it in line to do so. This returns the power to the states. It gets it out of Washington. There's still too many people around the country who are paying much too much for health care, limited opportunities to go to the doctors that they choose. So I support what we're doing here in terms of getting the money and the decisions back to the states so people can make individual choices.
That was Mitch McConnell. Here's Chuck Schumer on the same idea.
From what I'm told, it takes away even more benefits and hurts average Americans even more than the previous bill that was defeated.
So no Democratic votes, which means you need to get back to where you were last month. I understand you're 5 votes away. Can you make it up or not?
Well, we're continuing to work with each of the members. I met with Lindsey Graham this morning, talking to Democrats. There are some bipartisan discussions going on, but you've heard it. Senator Schumer thinks if you give decisions back to states and back to people, it takes the power out of Washington. And boy, the Democrats don't like that. And you're seeing it again today when Bernie Sanders introduces his complete government takeover of health care in the country. He calls it Medicare for all. It's a nice slogan, but when you get down to the nuts and the bolts of it, the details, you see that it's bad for the American taxpayer and it's bad for families all across the country.
You have a deadline coming up, September 30th, right? That's 16 days from now. If you do not get it done by then, is it over? Is Obamacare the law of the land for good?
We're continuing to work for every way we can. I want to repeal the whole thing. I voted for that, as did many, many Republicans. In the bipartisan hearings and discussions, those are working on trying to give flexibility to states so that people can buy the insurance that they want, which will also lower the cost if they don't have to pay for all of these mandates that are coming out of Washington as to what insurance has to cover. So I am always hopeful. This deadline that you talk about for the end of the month, that has to do with whether we can pass it on 50 votes or if it has to go to 60, and that's the result, what's happening with the bipartisan hearings.
It's going to be a lot more difficult. You know that, right? I mean, getting 60.
Well, especially with the Bernie Sanders approach, which basically is now becoming the litmus test for the liberal left, and all of the Democratic candidates looking to line up for the presidential run in 2020 have all jumped onto this complete government takeover of health care, which of course is going to result in much higher taxes and a lot fewer choices for the American, for patients and people all across the country.
Just a couple seconds left here. Has Washington changed since the Trump/Pelosi/Schumer deal of a week ago?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think I want to always find what's best for the country. I voted to keep the government open and to do the things we needed to do in terms of relief for the hurricane victims. I think it was the right vote to do.
It's not changing the way that you and others in leadership are looking at the way Washington gets it done.
Well, there was a bipartisan dinner last night at the White House with 6 senators, and I think if you're including Democrats, it doesn't mean you exclude Republicans. I'm looking for bipartisan solutions to make meaningful progress in the right direction for the country, which is economic growth. Tax reform is next up. We need to get people back to work and wages growing.
Yeah. Senator, thank you for your time. John Barrasso.
Thanks,
from
Bill.
Wyoming. Talk again. Thank you.
New revelations about the deadly Benghazi terror attack that left 4 Americans dead, including our U.S. ambassador. What we're now learning about the security failures just 2 weeks before that attack happened.